Hey, what's up peoples? Hardleg Joe here with the profile for Snake Lair, my build of the new Ogdoadic archetype, which seeks to blind second by using Lair of Darkness alongside a small danger engine to break boards and play through disruption. Going over our deck list, we've got one of the God Snake, two of his Dragon Landlord, 3 big feet, 3 Thunder from Down Under, a Queen Snake, a King Snake, a Dark Snake, a Light Snake, a Lake Snake, kind of, 3 Terraforming on Pause, Don't Mess with the Zohan, Metal Gear Solid 3, the Twin Snakes, and 3 Snake. For spell traps, we've got 3 Serpent Rain, 3 Serpent Drizzle, 3 Powerful Trade Unions, a Tornado, 3 Realms of Primordial Chaos, and 1/2 of a Scapegoat. The extra deck contains 1 each of Ixie Staple Card, a Galaxy Eyes, another Galaxy Eyes, the OTK Machine, a Galaxy Without Eyes, another Galaxy Eyes, the Trombone Mech, Big Doom Caliber Knight, a Goblin that collects reptiles, Big Number, Blue Luster Soldier, some Bad Dreams, an Alien, and Reptilianthony. The side deck I'll probably go over later, though it's mostly just other options for this deck, because there's actually quite a lot of different things you can do when combining the Ogdudes with Lair of Darkness. First though, I should probably explain how this archetype works, because they are very new at the time of recording, and also quite complicated. There's really only 2 things that unify them in design. They are all reptiles, and they all like being in the graveyard. Because of this, Snake Rain is a 3 of staple. You must play Snake Rain in this deck, and though you don't need it to win, it helps substantially. This is also why we play a Danger Engine of level 8 monsters alongside Trade-In for extra draw power. Dangers help you dig through your deck while discarding snakes to the graveyard, and not only are they themselves trade-in targets, but so are many of our powerful snakes. All the high-level ones have effects to summon themselves out of the graveyard, so the faster you can get them into the graveyard, the better. We play most of them at 1 because they're essentially dead in hand, and we also have so many ways to dump them from deck to grave that you'll almost always have access to whatever you need. In addition to Snake Rain, our 2 0 attack snakes can be discarded to send another snake from deck to graveyard. The light attribute one sends a dark snake, and the dark attribute sends a light snake. All the snakes are light and dark, by the way, which means this targets the entire archetype, and also, you can play stuff like Levianeer if you really want to. But yeah, in addition to all that, the archetype also has this spell, Water Lily, which sends 1 snake from your deck to your graveyard, and then, if you have 5 or more reptiles in the grave with different names, you could summon one of them for free. So basically, if you use Snake Rain and then this, you could summon any monster you want to out of the deck, essentially. And this card is searchable thanks to Twin Snakes over here. In addition to its discard effect, if it's summoned, you can search 1 Ogdoad spell trap. 90% of the time you want Water Lily to extend, but we also play this 1 trap for niche situations. All it does is create 2 0 attack tokens, unless you've got all 8 snakes in the graveyard. Then it summons any 2 you want, which makes this great for late game recovery. As for why you would want 2 tokens, that has to do with our big boss monsters who all summon themselves out of the graveyard by tributing monsters on the field. Our biggest boss, what I call the Snake God, requires 3 tributes, has 3100 attack, and as a quick effect, it can just wipe the board of all monsters, except ones that were summoned out of the graveyard, which usually clears your opponent's board while leaving yours intact. You can only use this effect once while it's face up on the field, but with how this deck works, it's not too hard to tribute this off to summon another snake, and then just summon it back again to refresh its effect. Our next 2 boss monsters, the King and Queen, each require 2 tributes, and each has 2 effects that work kind of like weird floodgates. Queen I generally find to be the more useful of the 2. If your opponent summons from the graveyard, you can send 1 card they control to the graveyard. It doesn't have to be the card that was summoned, and this effect does not target. Its second effect says, if your opponent sends a monster from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can summon a light or dark reptile from your graveyard, easily letting you get out the God Snake without having to tribute 3 monsters. Now obviously your opponent might do both of those things on their own, but these effects actually work best in tandem with the King Snake. He says if your opponent adds a card to their hand, you can randomly discard a card from their hand. Obviously, if they discard a monster, then it'll trigger your queen, letting you summon a monster for free. The King's other effect says if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, like what Queen or God Snake does, then you get to add a snake from your deck or graveyard to your hand. In addition to working with each other, the King and Queen also work with our third tier of boss monsters, which each require 1 tribute. This time, the light monster is the more effective of the two. When it's summoned, it summons a low-level snake from your graveyard, letting you trigger their effects while getting more material on board for your bigger bosses. Unfortunately, this comes at a downside, because your opponent also gets to summon from the grave. Their monster's effect is negated, fortunately, and if you have Queen on board, you can immediately send it right back, or get rid of any other troublesome card they might have, but you don't always have that luxury. The same idea applies to the Dark Snake as well. When it's summoned, you can return 2 banished monsters to the graveyard, but your opponent gets to add a monster from their grave to their hand. Again, if you have the King alongside this, they will immediately discard for doing that, and then you'll be able to plus off that if you have the Queen, but you don't always have that option. Fortunately, Dark isn't super necessary most of the time. I usually only summon it if I have an established board and I'm pushing for game, or if my opponent happens to banish one of my bosses. It's actually kind of neat how resilient this deck is. Thanks to Dark, we can afford to play all our boss monsters at 1, because there's not really any way your opponent can permanently get rid of them. We play out of the graveyard, we can easily get our monsters from the hand or deck into the graveyard, and if they're banished, we can just return them to the graveyard with Dark. Our only problem is getting the tributes to summon them back out, but that's where Lair of Darkness comes into play. All of our boss monsters tribute as cost to summon, which means Lair allows you to tribute off your opponent's monsters to summon your monsters. Perhaps more important, though, are the tokens this generates. At the end of every turn, you summon tokens to your field equal to the number of monsters you tributed that turn. And with this deck, it's really easy to get 3 or more tokens on the field. With your opponent focused on removing your boss monsters, they often don't have the ability to remove your tokens as well, giving you plenty of fodder to just re-summon your bosses next turn. And of course, every token you tribute for a summon is just going to be replaced again at the end phase, so as long as you can keep Lair, your advantage just snowballs out of control. That's why we play this plus the 3 Arima, which can be discarded to search Lair. You can also play Terraforming as well, but I opted instead for a 1 copy of Twin Twisters, since certain continuous spell traps can shut this deck entirely, and it's good to have an out. This, along with the 2 Diaboluses, are your flex spots, where you can put side deck cards or other generic tech cards in if you want. Speaking of this, while he's not essential, Diabolos is pretty neat. He's a trade-in target, and he can summon himself from the hand or graveyard if you tribute a dark monster, which you do a lot. Not only can this help you go for game, but since it's a level 8, it, along with the dangers and most of your boss snakes, can be used to access the extra deck. We're not playing anything too spicy in here, mostly just some generic rank 8 stuff. We got a nice package of Galaxy Eyes if you need to pop a whole bunch of stuff, Dragubulon and Numeron can go for the OTK, and Lancelot can attack directly, allowing you to easily summon Zeus. You can also use these to make links and stuff, particularly Blackluster Soldier, who works well with high-level monsters, because nothing in this archetype really limits what you can summon, except for Null, who I suppose I should go over. In addition to acting like a foolish burial when discarded, this thing can summon itself from the grave if you control a snake, or no monsters at all. However, while it's on the field, you can only summon reptiles, which is why the only rank 4 we have is King of the Feral Imps, and our links are mostly limited to Alien Frame and the Reptilian link, neither of which is super useful. Well, I guess the Reptilian Link can make a monster's attack 0 when summoned. That sets up for the OTK. And it does search a reptile too, but most of your monsters aren't that useful in hand, so the search isn't that great. But yeah, all that leaves then is Zoha, who acts kind of like a searcher. If he's sent from the field to the graveyard, or summoned from the graveyard, you can do the following effect. Your opponent draws a card, you search a snake, and then you both discard a card. This allows you to get any snake to your hand or into the graveyard, but obviously it helps your opponent as well. Unless you've got King or Queen Snake out, because both of them can benefit from the draw and discard. Also, Zohan has a second effect, where if he's in the graveyard, you can discard any card to add him back to your hand. Which seems fairly useless, but it's actually come in clutch a lot. It lets you get your big bosses out of your hand late game, while giving you something to normal summon so that you can start your plays again. He's weird, and you could probably bump him down to 2 or even 1 if you really want to, but I find it's good to max out on normal summons, especially when the other 2 low levels both serve as foolish burials. But yeah, that's pretty much the deck, and like I said, there's a lot of potential here. I've only been working on this for 2 weeks, and while this build works pretty well, I feel like there's still a lot you can do with the archetype. Swarming is not that difficult, allowing you to make some interesting link plays. The light and dark focus gives you access to chaos stuff, again, like Levianair I mentioned, which can be searched alongside Diabolos with something like Melody of Awakening Dragon. This archetype also has another trap and a field spell, both easily searched if you want to tech in single copies. And if you just want to stick with Lair of Darkness, that opens up a whole bunch of unique tech cards. Super Poly with Starving Venom, all the viruses, Ballista Squad, just a whole trap build. And if you're going for control, reptiles have their own Icarus attack in offerings to the Snake Deity for even more disruption. Overall, it's a unique and exciting new archetype, and I'm curious to see if people will find some way to break it in the future, perhaps with some new support. For now, though, I'm happy with this, and hopefully you are too. Thanks for watching. Remember to like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Content in general, and consider joining my Patreon if you want access to the Discord. Until next time, though, good luck, and have fun.